Now we will be discussing a very important physiological system of our body called the digestive system. First, let's have a brief overview of this system. This system consists of a long muscular tube extending from mouth to anus, and some accessory organs are also associated with this muscular tube. This tube is modified at places to accommodate functions which that particular part is assigned. For example, at places where the function is just the transport, this muscular tube is simply narrow and long. At certain places, for example stomach, where there is a need for the storage of food, this tube is extended into a bag-like structure. What I mean to say that the digestive system consists of a tube, muscular tube, but this tube is modified at places according to the function which that particular part is assigned. This tract is also called as alimentary tract or gastrointestinal tract. Now, before we proceed further, let us first see what is the purpose of this digestive system. Now, every system of our body has a particular function, a particular purpose in the whole system of the body. Digestive system also has a purpose. So, first let us see what is this purpose. As we know, our body performs many different functions, and these functions need energy. For example, if we have to move from one place to another, it is a function, and this needs energy. Without energy, we cannot move, our muscles cannot help us move from one place to another. Now, this energy comes from the food that we eat. The food may be from the animal source or from the plant source. So, first of all, to make this food reach our body for the purpose of energy, we ingest food through the mouth. So, the first function or the purpose of digestive system is to provide a route for the entry of food into our body. This is the first function of the digestive system. It provides a pathway, a route, wherefrom we take the food inside our body. Now, the food that we take when reach our body cannot be utilized by our cells, because our cells cannot utilize this food because the molecules of the food are large enough. Our cells utilize the food molecules that are very small. So, the food that we ingest through the digestive system cannot be utilized unless the bigger molecules of food are broken down into the smaller molecules. And this breakdown of the larger molecules of food into the smaller molecules takes place inside our digestive system. So, the next function of our digestive system is to break down larger molecules of food into the smaller molecules so that it can be utilized. So far, we have discussed two functions of the digestive system. First, it provides the route through which the food reaches our body. Second, after the food reaches into our digestive system, it is broken down into smaller molecules. This process of breakdown of food from larger molecules into the smaller molecules is called digestion. Digestion is one of the important functions of the digestive system, and it's on this function this system has received this name, digestive system. Once the food inside the digestive tract is digested, the next step is that this digested food should reach to our cells. It cannot reach to our cells unless and until it crosses the mucosal wall of the gastrointestinal tract. And in fact, this function, this transport of the digested food into the blood or inside the lymph also takes place in the digestive system. And this process of the transport of smaller molecules of food into the blood and lymph is called as absorption. So this is the third function of the digestive system. So we can say the digestive system plays, number one, an important role, it provides us a route through which the food enters our body, number one. Number second, it breaks down the food from larger molecules into smaller molecules, that is digestion. And third, it transports the digested food into the blood and lymph. So these are first three main functions of digestive system, that is ingestion, that is taking in of food, digestion and absorption. So finally, when the digestive system performs these functions, that is ingestion, digestion and absorption, the digested food or the nutrients reach to our system. So here we can say the basic purpose of the digestive system is to provide us a continuous supply of nutrients, electrolytes and water. Because besides nutrients, we also need water and certain electrolytes. Though water and electrolyte does not need any digestion. So the main purpose of the digestive system is to provide us a continuous supply of nutrients which is required for the purpose of energy, so that we can survive, our cells can perform the functions of growth and repair. This purpose to provide nutrition is served by different processes, as we mentioned earlier. Number one, first there is ingestion, then digestion, and third, absorption. Now, besides these three functions, the food that remains undigested into the digestive tract also needs to be expelled out. And this function is also performed by digestion. Digestive system excretes the undigested food in the form of feces to the exterior. And this process is called defecation. So, the another function that will be added to the list of the functions of digestive system is defecation. So far the functions we have studied of digestive system are ingestion, digestion, absorption and defecation. Now, before we discuss more functions of the digestive system and we elaborate the functions of the digestive system further, we will have a general outlook of the structure and the organs of the digestive system. As I mentioned earlier, that the digestive system is basically a simple muscular tube which is modified at places according to the function that place has been assigned. Now, the parts of the digestive system can be divided into two broad categories: primary digestive organs and the accessory digestive organs. Primary digestive organs are mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestines and large intestines. Small intestines are further divided into its first part, duodenum, then jejunum and the terminal part called ileum. Likewise, the large intestine is also divided into certain parts. First, the part that joins with the last part of the intestine is called cecum. Following cecum is the ascending colon, then transverse colon, then the descending colon, sigmoid, rectum and anus. So, these are actually the parts of this muscular tube. That's why these are called as primary digestive organs. Apart from these primary digestive organs. The other organs which are though not the part of this tube but are associated with the digestion. These accessory digestive organs are teeth, tongue, salivary glands, pancreas, and liver. In this diagram, you can see the digestive system, the alimentary canal or the GIT is a long tube starting at the mouth. After the mouth, you can see a simple tube going down through the thorax into the abdomen called esophagus, then the distended bag-like structure called the stomach. After stomach, the first part of this intestine, which is in an inverted C-shaped form, is called the duodenum. After duodenum, the coiled portion you can see is the jejunum and ileum. After small intestine starts the large intestines, in which you can see a distended sac, cecum, then the large intestine going upwards called ascending colon, the transverse portion of the colon called the transverse colon, then the part that is descending is called the descending colon. Following descending colon is the sigmoid, then a portion of the large intestine which is very straight is called rectum, and then anus. So these are the primary organs of the digestive system. You can also see here the accessory organs of the digestive system, especially the accessory glands, which are the salivary glands, the pancreas, and the liver. Now, if we cut this muscular tube, apart from some modifications, it is somewhat similar at all the places. It has 4 layers, and from outside to in, these layers are serosa, which is a connective tissue covering this muscular tube. Then starts the muscle layer. The muscle layer is further divided into 2 layers. Outer muscular layer, the fibers in that layer are longitudinal. That's why that's called as longitudinal muscle layer. Inside the longitudinal muscle layer is the circular muscle layer. After the muscle layer is the submucosa, and the innermost layer is mucosa. Besides these 4 basic layers of the gastrointestinal tract, there is also a layer of sparse muscles called Muscularis Mucosa. This Muscularis Mucosa lies between the submucosa and mucosa. Apart from this, 2 very important nervous plexus, that is a network of neurons, is also lies between these layers. Between the muscle layers is a nervous plexus called Enteric plexus, and within the mucosa is the another nervous plexus called submucosal plexus. So generally in GIT, in this muscular tube, we have 4 layers: outer connective tissue layer, serosa, then the muscular layer, where the outer layer is longitudinal muscle layer, inner is the circular muscle layer, then submucosa and mucosa. In addition, we have Muscularis Mucosa, a thin muscle layer between submucosa and mucosa, and 2 nervous plexuses. One is placed between the muscle layers called Enteric plexus, and another is located in the submucosa called submucosal plexus. Now, before we proceed any further, let us see some basic characteristics of the gastrointestinal tract. Let us first discuss the neuronal control of GIT. Actually, the functions of the GIT, which we will be discussing, which we have already discussed and some will be discussed later, these functions are regulated by 2 communicating systems of the body. One is the endocrine system, and second is the nervous system. So first let us discuss the nervous control of GIT. Now GIT is special regarding nervous control, in the sense that apart from the nervous supply that comes from the outside, it has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system. As I mentioned earlier, the two plexuses, nervous plexuses, that is located in between the different layers of GIT, actually constitute this enteric nervous system, or the personal nervous system of the gastrointestinal tract. The number of neurons in these plexuses is about 100 million, which is nearly equal to the number of neurons present in the whole spinal cord. From this you can judge the importance of this intrinsic nervous system regarding the functions of the GIT. In fact, GIT can function of its own without the external nervous supply by the help of its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system. And this enteric nervous system is composed of both myenteric plexus and submucosal plexus. The myenteric plexus that is located between the muscle layer usually controls the movements of the GIT. There are actually different types of movements which take place in the GIT, and these movements are mostly controlled by the myenteric plexus. On the other hand, the submucosal plexus controls the secretions of the GIT, and some local controls are also associated with the submucosal plexus. In brief, both the functions, that is movements and secretions of the GIT, are regulated by its own nervous system. As far as external nervous supply of the GIT is controlled, like other visceral organs, it's also supplied by the autonomic nervous systems. And both divisions of the autonomic nervous system, that is the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, they both supply GIT. And the nerve endings of both sympathetic and parasympathetic are interconnected with the intrinsic nervous supply of the GIT. As I said earlier, that GIT can function of its own without the extrinsic supply. However, the extrinsic supply of sympathetic and parasympathetic, however, modifies the functions of the enteric nervous system. For example, the parasympathetic system facilitates the functions of the GIT. It increases both the movements and the secretions of the GIT. On the contrary, the sympathetic nervous system has an opposite effect. It decreases the functions of the GIT. It decreases both the movements of the GIT as well as the secretions of the GIT. Thus, we can say that GIT can function of its own with its enteric nervous system. However, extrinsic nervous system modifies its functions also. Now, the second control which controls the functions of the GIT is the hormonal control. As I said earlier, that GIT is controlled both by nervous system and endocrine system. We have discussed the nervous system. Now we will be discussing the endocrine system, that is the hormones that control the functions of the GIT. In GIT, the endocrine cells that secrete the hormone are not organized into a gland. In fact, they are scattered throughout their GIT in the GIT wall. It may also be said that GIT is one of the largest endocrine organs of the body. Here, the endocrine cells secreting hormone are found scattered throughout the GIT, and so far 5 important hormones have been located within the GIT that regulate the functions of the GIT. These hormones are gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin, motilin, and gastric inhibitory peptide. Gastrin is a hormone which regulates the secretion of the acid. In our GIT, the stomach is the organ where there is the formation of acid, and this acid formation is regulated by the hormone gastrin. Secretin, which is the another hormone of the GIT, regulates the secretions of pancreas as well as the bile secretion from the liver. Whenever the hormone secretin is released, it increases the alkaline secretions from the pancreas as well as from the liver. Third very important hormone of the gastrointestinal tract is cholecystokinin. Cholecystokinin hormone is released whenever our diet contains fat. So we can say the stimulus for the secretion of cholecystokinin is fat. This cholecystokinin in turn causes pancreatic secretions containing enzymes, as well as it causes the contraction of gallbladder so that it secretes the bile into the duodenum. Gallbladder is a small pear-like structure located on the lower lobe of the liver. So we can say that gastrointestinal tract is controlled in fact by its own hormones and by its own nervous system. It can function independently. However, the external nervous system regulates or modifies some of its functions. Now let us discuss the functions of the digestive system, which we discussed earlier, in more detail. The most important function of the digestive system is digestion, that is, breakdown of the larger molecules of the food into the smaller molecules. Now this digestion is accomplished by various secretions and enzymes that are secreted within the gastrointestinal tract. These secretions and enzymes act upon the food and digest it, that means breaks it into the smaller molecules, and after the food is digested, finally it can be utilized for our cells for deriving energy and for performing different functions. Apart from the secretions, there are different movements that take place in the gastrointestinal tract. For example, when we ingest food, we chew it first. So chewing is a movement of gastrointestinal tract. Then after we chew the food, this food is ingested or swallowed into the stomach. This swallowing is another movement. After the food reaches our posterior portion of the mouth, which is called as pharynx, it loses our voluntary control, and after that it is automatically moved along the gastrointestinal tract. So after pharynx, it reaches the esophagus, where food is propelled forward into the stomach. In stomach, there are also certain movements. Now movements and secretions together accomplish the function of digestion. Without secretions, there cannot be any digestion, but without movements, there also cannot be any digestion, because if we ingest food and it remains in the esophagus and does not move forward in the stomach, it will not be acted upon the digestive juices of the stomach. So for digestive juices of the stomach to act upon the food has to reach first into the stomach, and food is carried to the stomach by the movements of the GIT. So we can say that both movements and secretions are essential for digestion. Apart from this, the regulation of these two and the coordination of both the movements and secretions is very important. For example, food reaches the stomach, and at that time the stomach does not secrete any secretion, that will be useless. Then when the food moves away from the stomach into the duodenum, stomach secretes the secretions, and here again these secretions will be of no use. So what is required, that both the movements and the secretions should be coordinated, which means that when the food reaches stomach, at the same time there should be secretions, so that the secretions act upon the food. Furthermore, when the food moves out of the digestive tract for absorption, it should move along the tract for absorption. So thus we can say for the digestion both movements and secretions are essential. Now we can make a list of the functions of the digestive tract. First function, as I mentioned earlier, is the ingestion of food. Second is the movement of the food along the tract. Third, secretions, which include various enzymes. These two, movements and secretions, lead to the digestion. So the fourth function is digestion of food. Following digestion, there is absorption, and at the last, there is defecation. So the functions of digestive system are ingestion of the food, movement of the food, secretion of various enzymes, digestion, absorption, and defecation. Now let us see what are the different types of movements in the GIT. There are so many different types of movements of every part of the GIT, but broadly they can be divided into two groups depending upon the function of the movement. These are called as the functional types of the movement. So GIT has two functional types of the movement. One movement is called as propulsive moments. These are the movements which cause food to move forward along the gastrointestinal tract. Second type of functional movement is called the mixing movements. The function of the mixing movements is to keep the contents of the GIT, that's food and the secretions, thoroughly mixed. So we can say the many different types of movements of the GIT can be divided according to their function into two types: propulsive movements and mixing movements. Propulsive movements carry the food forward along the GIT, and mixing movements mix the food with different secretions. Now the basic propulsive movement of the GIT is called peristalsis. Peristalsis may be defined as the wave of contraction followed by a wave of relaxation which travels in an onward direction. A contractile ring is formed around the gut, and then this contractile ring moves forward. Here two things are very important regarding this propulsive movement called peristalsis. First, it is a wave of contraction followed by a wave of relaxation. What happens if you consider a soft tube and you form a ring around it with your finger and then push this finger forward, whatever be the content inside this soft tube will move forward. At the same time, the portion of the tube behind this constriction will be relaxed. So in peristalsis, there is a wave of contraction followed by the wave of relaxation. Also, this contractile ring is formed which moves forward and also takes the content forward. This is how peristalsis takes place in GIT, and this peristalsis causes the propulsion of food at most of the places. Now this peristalsis is a bit modified at different places of the GIT. It is a bit different in the stomach and different in the small intestines and different in the large intestine. However, the basic working of this wave, this peristaltic wave, remains almost the same. Another thing which is important for the peristalsis, that the peristalsis always moves in the analward direction. That's it always takes the food towards the anus. Practically, it never moves from the reverse direction. That is, it does not take food back towards the mouth. This is another important point regarding to the peristalsis. Third important thing is that the myenteric plexus, which I mentioned earlier, which is the intrinsic plexus of the nervous system, is very essential for the peristalsis. It has been seen that in persons in whom the myenteric plexus is not developed, the peristalsis remains very weak. This means that for effective peristalsis, myenteric plexus is necessary. The specific movements of different parts of GIT. In mouth, we have mastication, that is chewing of the food. This is a movement of the food in which the larger pieces of the food are broken down into the smaller pieces. This is also very important that because here the digestion is the mechanical type. No enzyme is used in crushing the food. It is because of our teeth that the larger particles of the food is broken down into the smaller particles, and then it becomes easier for the digestive juices to act upon these smaller particles of the food. After the food is prepared by chewing and it is ready to be taken inside, the another movement that takes place is called as swallowing. Swallowing has three phases. First is a voluntary phase in which we voluntarily push the food backwards with our tongue into the posterior of the mouth. Once the food reaches the pharynx, from here it becomes automatic and involuntary. So the first stage of the swallowing is voluntary stage, followed by two involuntary stages. First involuntary stage is the pharyngeal stage in which the food crosses the pharynx. This is a very complex moment here in the pharynx because pharynx is used both for passage of air into the lungs and passage of food into the esophagus. So this function has to be regulated very perfectly because the passage for food and oxygen is same. During swallowing, the respiration should not be compromised for a long period because during the swallowing of food, if it takes a long time, at that time the respiration has to be stopped, and if it stops for more time, it will cause respiratory problems. So swallowing has to be very quick and well coordinated, and the time when we are inspiring air, food should not be swallowed, and when food is swallowed, the supply to the lungs should stop. And this is what happens in the in the pharyngeal phase of swallowing. When the food is being swallowed in the pharynx, there are some automatic movements, motor movements, which close the respiratory pathway so that food does not go into the trachea. Following swallowing, the another movement is the peristalsis of the esophagus. It is same as we have discussed earlier. Then comes the stomach, where different movements take place. First movement is the relaxation. The stomach relaxes to accommodate food. The main function of the stomach is basically the storage of food. So when the food reaches the stomach, it relaxes its walls so that it can accommodate more and more food. Apart from accommodating food, it's very important that the walls of stomach get relaxed, because if the stomach walls remain tonically constricted, what will happen? The more and more food when it reach the stomach, it will increase the intragastric pressure. Now this increased intragastric pressure will lead to the reflux of food back into the esophagus, or it will lead to the quick emptying of the stomach into the duodenum without food being digested inside the stomach. So here, first in stomach, what happens that its walls relax so that it can accommodate more and more food. Second movement which takes place in the stomach is called as pyloric pump. Pyloric pump basically are the strong peristaltic waves that take place in the stomach to empty the food into the duodenum. Now this stomach emptying or pyloric pump is very important, and it has to be very much regulated. Stomach has to empty itself at a pace or at a rate where duodenum can accommodate the process of digestion and absorption. For example, if from the stomach the food passes very quickly into the duodenum cannot further digest it, because the time the duodenum gets is very less, and further the food will not get enough time to be digested. So the stomach has to release the digested food very slowly into the duodenum to accommodate proper digestion and proper absorption. Then in small intestines, again there will be the peristalsis and the mixing movements. That is, both propulsive movements and mixing movements take place in the small intestine. The mixing movements of the small intestine are called segmentation contractions, and the propulsive movement here is called as peristalsis. Following small intestine are the large intestines, where there are two types of movements, propulsive and mixing. Propulsive movement of the large intestine are called mass movements, and the mixing movements are called hostrations. And the last movement of the gastrointestinal tract is defecation, which I have discussed earlier. That means the expulsion of feces to the outside of the body. Now, after the movements, now let us discuss different secretions of the gastrointestinal tract. Starting from the mouth, in the mouth we have a secretion called saliva. This saliva comes from the glands called the salivary glands. These salivary glands, I have already said that these are the accessory glands of the digestive system. Basically, the glands in the digestive system can be divided into two types, accessory glands and the main glands. Along the whole wall of the GIT through the tract, GIT is lined with many single cell as well as compound glands. These small single cell glands as well as compound glands are located within the wall of the GIT. These are the primary glands of the digestive system. But apart from these glands that are located within the GIT, there are some glands that are located outside the GIT, and those glands that are outside of the GIT are called as accessory glands. Among these accessory glands, one is the salivary gland, second the pancreas, and third the liver. So here in the mouth, the accessory glands, saliva, which are three in number, there are three pairs of salivary glands, they secrete a secretion called saliva. Then in esophagus, there is no digestive secretion. However, there is the secretion of mucus. Mucus is in fact a secretion, that is a viscid secretion, which gives protection to the GIT and is secreted all along the GIT. There are mucus secreting single cell and compound cell glands which line the GIT from the mouth to the anus. So we can say the secretion mucus is secreted all along the GIT, and the main purpose of this secretion is protection. Mucus is not a digestive secretion. Here we will be discussing the digestive secretions only. So in mouth, first there will be saliva, which comes from salivary glands. In the stomach, there are two types of secretions. One is acid and second is the pepsin. Pepsin is an enzyme which digests proteins. From liver, the secretion which helps in digestion is called bile. Bile actually does not contain any enzyme, but it helps in the digestion of fats. Pancreas, which is also an accessory gland, also secretes many enzymes. In fact, it secretes a cocktail of enzymes that help in digestion of different components of food. And as I said, in the whole GIT, there is secretion of mucus. Now, the secretions according to function can be also divided into two groups, digestive secretions and protective secretions. So in the protective secretions, we have only one secretion, that is mucus, which is secreted throughout the GIT from the mouth to the anus, both by single cell glands called goblet cells and also by compound mucus glands. The digestive secretions that are secreted in the GIT are various enzymes, acid and bile. Now if we see all the enzymes that are secreted in the digestive system, these are salivary amylase present in the saliva, secreted in the mouth. Then we have pepsin, this is secreted in the stomach. Then the enzyme trypsin, chymotrypsin, carboxypeptidase, pancreatic lipase and pancreatic amylase. These 6 enzymes and many more are secreted by the pancreas. Now these enzymes, you see that they are made for the digestion of all the types of the food components. Basically, if we divide our food chemically, it can be divided into 3 different groups. carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And our GIT contains or secretes all the enzymes necessary for the digestion of all the three food components. For carbohydrates, we have first in saliva, salivary amylase. In pancreas, the enzyme for carbohydrates is pancreatic amylase. For fats, we have various pancreatic enzymes called pancreatic lipases, and for proteins we have enzyme pepsin in stomach and several other enzymes from the pancreas like carboxypeptidase, trypsin, and chymotrypsin. So here you can see that for all the food components to be digested, our GIT is secreting all the type of enzymes. For the digestion of carbohydrates, we have separate enzymes. For digestion of fats, we have the enzymes, and for the digestion of the proteins, we also have many different enzymes. Thus, by different movements and by different secretions, our digestive system accomplishes the function of digestion. Besides these enzymes, in the small intestines, there are cells called enterocytes. The apical border of these cells, that is the border that faces towards the lumen of the GIT, there are certain membrane-bound enzymes. And these enzymes are for all the three types of the foods, that is for carbohydrates, proteins, as well as fats. Here, the digested food components which are not yet completely digested, when enter into the enterocytes for absorption into the blood, they are further acted upon by these enterocyte enzymes, and thus the food products are finally digested. Now let us see the digestion of all these food components one by one. First, let us discuss the digestion of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the major constituents of our diet. Our diet mostly contains the carbohydrates. Now, there are different types of carbohydrates in our diet. One is starch. Starch forms the major portion of our carbohydrate diet. Besides starch, there is lactose and another is sucrose. These are three major carbohydrates found in our diet. So let us discuss first the digestion of the starch. First, when the starch reaches in the mouth, it is acted upon by the salivary amylase. It starts digesting this amylase and converts it into the maltase. The digestion, however, in the mouth is very small and is approximately only 5%. However, the food of the mouth mixed with saliva containing salivary amylase, when reached the stomach, continues to be digested by this saliva. So, after the food is swallowed and when it reaches the stomach, it is still acted upon by the salivary amylase. So that in stomach, there is further digestion of the carbohydrates, though there is no enzyme for carbohydrate digestion secreted by the stomach. So in stomach, actually the digestion of the carbohydrate takes place by the same salivary amylase. Further, the amount of carbohydrate which is not here, the digestion reaches up to the 15%. Still, there is lot of starch left in the stomach which is yet to be digested. Then when it reaches the duodenum or the intestine, here the pancreas gland secretes many enzymes for digestion of both carbohydrates, fats and proteins. For the digestion of carbohydrates, intestine secrete pancreatic amylase. This amylase is similar to the amylase secreted by the saliva. However, this amylase is more potent than salivary amylase. So, finally, in the intestine, the whole of the starch is digested within minutes and converted into maltose. So, this is the fate of starch digested in different parts of the GIT, first in the mouth, stomach and intestine. So, finally, by the help of pancreatic amylase and the salivary amylase, the starch is finally converted into the maltose. There are no enzymes for lactose and sucrose in the mouth or the stomach. However, when this maltose, lactose and sucrose further move forward for absorption into the small intestines, the small intestine, if this is the lumen of the small intestine, these are the cells that line the small intestine. These cells are called enterocytes, and these enterocytes contain many membrane-bound enzymes. Now, during their absorption, this maltose, lactose and sucrose are further acted upon by these enterocyte enzymes. These enterocyte enzymes are maltase, lactase and sucrase. So finally, the maltase, lactase and sucrase act upon these carbohydrates and convert them into glucose, galactose and fructose. So finally, we can say the starch, which is a carbohydrate but a polycarbohydrate, is finally digested and converted into a monosaccharide. So in digestion, what happens? A large molecule, that is starch, which is a polysaccharide, is finally converted into a smaller molecule or monosaccharide, and this monosaccharide, which is mainly glucose, can be utilized by our cells for the purpose of energy. After the digestion of carbohydrates, let us discuss the digestion of the fats. The main digestive enzymes for the digestion of fats is secreted by the pancreas, which are called as pancreatic lipases. But for this enzyme to act and digest efficiently, the fat which reaches our gastrointestinal tract are basically the large droplets. Now, for effective digestion, these large droplets first need to be broken down into the smaller droplets so that the lipase enzymes can digest the fat more quickly. Actually, the enzymes of our GIT act only on the surface of the food. So if there is more surface area, the digestion will be more rapid. So for the rapid and better digestion of the fats, it is imperative that their surface area is increased. And in fact, in our GIT, the fat droplets, which are in large size, are broken down into the smaller molecules to increase their surface area, so that finally the enzyme lipases act upon these small fat droplets. Now, breaking down of the large molecule of fat into the smaller molecules of fat is called as emulsification. Now, this emulsification process is carried out by the bile. Bile is a secretion that is secreted by the liver. Though bile does not contain any enzyme for the digestion, but it contains a substance called bile salts. Bile salts has a property that they decrease the surface area of the fat droplets by breaking down it into the smaller droplets of fat. In this way, bile, though does not digest fat but helps in the digestion of fats, by the process of emulsification. So once the fat is emulsified, it is acted upon by the pancreatic lipases. The major fat that is present in our diet are the triglycerides. Now triglycerides, that is the major fat, is acted upon by the pancreatic lipases, and it digests into fatty acids and monoglyceride. So we can say that the fats are finally digested into the fatty acids and monoglycerides. Now these two substances can be utilized by our cells. Now the another food component are the proteins. Proteins are very essential nutrients of our body. We have so far discussed the digestion of carbohydrates, fats. Now we will discuss how the proteins are digested. The digestion of protein starts in the stomach, where the enzyme pepsin is secreted. When the pepsin is secreted from the stomach, it is in an inactive form called pepsinogen. Now the acid also secreted by the stomach helps in the activation of this pepsinogen into pepsin. Once the pepsin is activated, it digests the proteins and converts them into proteoses and peptones. Now, after stomach, in the intestine are secreted the pancreatic enzymes. Various proteolytic enzymes, that is the protein digesting enzymes, are secreted by the intestine. These are trypsin, chymotrypsin, carboxypeptidase, and etc. Now these pancreatic enzymes now act upon the proteoses and the peptones and convert them into amino acids and small polypeptides. After this step, when the amino acids and polypeptides are being absorbed into the enterocytes, here on the apical border of the enterocytes are present many peptidases that act upon these small polypeptides or dipeptides and finally convert whole of the proteins into the amino acid. So the end product of the protein digestion is the amino acids. Proteins are large chains of amino acid, and here we get very small amino acids. In this way, proteins are broken down into smaller molecules, and this smaller molecule, that is amino acid, can be utilized by our cells. So if we summarize the digestive system, we can say that digestive system is basically a tube which consists of mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestines and large intestines, and it accomplishes the function of digestion and absorption. Digestion is accomplished by the secretions as well as movements. Many different secretions take place in the digestive system. There are enzymes which digest many different foods, that's carbohydrates, fats and proteins. And the purpose of digestive system is basically to break down the larger molecules of food into the smaller molecules, which is called as process of digestion, so that these smaller molecules of food can be utilized by the body. In this process, we have seen that carbohydrates, which are larger molecules, polysaccharides, is converted into glucose, which is a monosaccharide and a very small molecule. Similarly, the fats, which are large molecules, are finally digested into the smaller molecules, that is fatty acids. And likewise, proteins are digested upon by different enzymes and finally converted into the amino acids, which are the small molecules, and these smaller molecules, that is glucose, fatty acids and amino acids, can be utilized by the cells after they are absorbed in the GIT from the lumen into the blood that circulates and takes these nutrients to the all cells of the body. Thank you.